I don't really tell this story much anymore. Honestly, most folks just roll their eyes when they hear stuff like this. I probably would too if I hadn't seen it myself, right there on the video screen. But yeah, I saw it. And to this day, I still don't know what the hell I was looking at. I'm not some city guy trying to make a name off ghost stories or anything. I've lived here my whole life, down in a hollow about 10 miles off the main road in southern Appalachia. Folks around here know me. I keep to myself, run a small piece of land, raise pigs mostly, a few chickens, a couple cows. It isn't fancy, but it's honest work. I like the quiet. Anyway, this all started about a year back. Middle of summer, hot and muggy, the kind of nights where the crickets don't ever seem to stop. Around that time, a few of my pigs started going missing. Just one at first. I figured maybe it broke loose through the fence. Pigs are strong, they'll root under if they get determined enough. So I patched it up and didn't think much about it. But then another one went missing, and then another. And that's when I started paying attention. Now before I get into that, let me just say I'm not superstitious. I grew up out here. I've seen coyotes, bears, and people doing dumb things in the woods. There's always a logical reason if you look hard enough. So when I first noticed pigs disappearing, my brain went straight to predators or some punk teenagers. I wasn't thinking monsters. I guess the reason I'm even sharing this now is because I still can't make sense of what I saw later. And it's been eating at me. The video's still on that old flash drive in my desk. I've shown it to maybe 3 people. One laughed, one said it was edited, and the other just stared at the screen and said, "Man, that isn't right." It all started like any regular day. I'd wake up around 5:30, feed the animals, drink my coffee outside before the sun got too hot. Most days are quiet. Maybe a truck passing on the highway miles away, or my neighbor Randy's dog barking at squirrels. You don't get much excitement out here unless the weather turns. But that week, something just felt off. The pigs were restless, grunting more at night like they were spooked. My dog Rusty, who usually sleeps on the porch, started growling into the dark for no reason. I thought maybe coyotes were coming around again. It happens every year. When the first pig vanished, I told myself it was my fault. Probably left the gate unlatched. When the second went missing, I tightened every lock I had. I even stayed up a couple nights, sitting by the window with a flashlight, feeling ridiculous but still doing it. Thing is, when you live out here, you kind of learn to handle things yourself. Calling the sheriff over a missing pig, they'd laugh and tell you to buy better fencing. So, I kept quiet. Looking back, I can't tell you the exact moment things turned from weird to wrong, but I remember the night before I got the cameras. Rusty started barking like crazy. Not the usual warning bark either. This was that low, mean growl that makes your stomach tighten up. I went outside with my flashlight, shining toward the pig pen. I didn't see anything, but the air felt heavy. Like when a storm's about to break, but the sky's still clear. After that, I didn't sleep right for a week. I'd wake up to little noises. The fence rattling, pigs snorting, something moving in the brush. I told myself it was just raccoons or deer. But I also knew raccoons don't carry off a 200-pound hog. That's when I decided to get a couple of those cheap security cameras online. Figured I'd catch whoever or whatever was sneaking around. But before I even hooked them up, I remember standing out there one morning, looking at that pen and thinking something's off. I couldn't put my finger on it. The mud was packed down in a way that didn't look right, not hoof prints, not boot tracks, just kind of wide. Like someone big had been standing there, barefoot maybe. I told myself it was just the pigs moving around, even though deep down I knew it wasn't. That same morning, my neighbor Randy stopped by for a cup of coffee. I mentioned I'd lost another pig, and he said, "You sure it isn't those wild dogs again?" I shrugged. Didn't want to sound paranoid, but he looked at me funny when I told him I hadn't seen a single track. "Could be folks messing with you," he said. "People do stupid things for a laugh." He wasn't wrong. We'd had teenagers drive through before, shooting signs and stealing mailboxes. So yeah, human mischief still made more sense than anything else. But still, something about it didn't sit right. By the time I got those cameras set up, one facing the barn door and one aimed toward the pen, I figured I'd catch whoever was behind it in a week or two. I didn't expect anything strange. I just wanted proof. Maybe a coyote, maybe a person, whatever. I remember saying to myself that morning, "All right, let's see what you are." And that's how it started. Just a regular guy trying to solve a regular problem. If I'd known what I was actually going to see on that screen a month later, I might have just sold the pigs and left it alone, but I didn't. And that decision, setting up those cameras, that's what changed everything. You know, before all that stuff started happening, life out here was about as normal as it gets. Quiet, predictable. Sometimes boring, sure, but in a good way. I liked knowing what my day was going to look like before it even started. Most mornings, I'd be up before the sun. My old alarm clock doesn't even work anymore. Rusty, my dog, kind of took over that job. He'd start whining by the door because he knows it's feeding time, so I'd pull on my boots, grab my coffee, and head out before the dew burned off the grass. You could smell the mud and feed mixing in the air, that earthy, sour kind of smell that somehow feels right if you've been around farms long enough. The pigs would start squealing as soon as they saw me come around the corner. They know what the bucket means. I'd dump feed in the trough, pat the big sow on the back, check the water line, and that was pretty much the routine. Nothing fancy, just keeping things going. After that, I'd usually fix something. There's always something breaking around here. Fence boards, the gate hinges, water lines, you name it. The place is old, built by my granddad back in the 1960s, and I've just kept patching it up over the years. Every now and then I'd head into town, get feed or supplies from the co-op. Everybody knows everybody down there. You stop in, someone's always got a story about deer getting into their garden or a bear turning over their trash cans. I'd grab a soda, talk a few minutes, and head home. That was life. Simple, quiet. I liked it that way. But even before the pigs started vanishing, I remember feeling like something was just a little off that summer. Can't even tell you why. Just these tiny things you don't think much of at the time. Rusty barking more than usual at night, the pigs acting spooked for no reason, like something was setting them off. One night I was sitting on the porch, having a beer after dinner. It was real still out, no wind, no bugs buzzing, just quiet. Rusty perked up and gave this low growl toward the tree line. I grabbed my flashlight, but I didn't see a thing. Just black trees and maybe some movement. But you can trick your eyes easy in that kind of light. I remember telling him, "Ain't nothing out there, boy," but he kept growling until I called him inside. Didn't think much about it then. Figured maybe it was a possum or a deer. But looking back, that's when it started. Those small moments that didn't add up. A couple mornings later, one of the pigs had broken part of the fence. I figured it was just rooting too close and pushed under. Happens sometimes. I spent half the morning digging the post back in, cussing at the heat. While I was out there, I kept getting that feeling like I was being watched. You ever get that? Like someone's standing behind you even though you know no one's there? I brushed it off. Probably just my brain being weird, maybe too much caffeine, who knows. That afternoon, my brother Clay stopped by. He's the talkative one. He came to borrow my trailer and stayed an hour longer than he needed to, sitting on the tailgate, drinking coffee, talking about some neighbor's kid who wrecked his four-wheeler. He looked out toward the pen and said, "Man, you ever notice how your pigs get jumpy at night?" I said, "Yeah, lately they've been acting weird. Might be the heat." He laughed and said, "Maybe it's that old bear Randy's been talking about." I told him I hadn't seen any sign of a bear. No prints, no droppings, nothing. He just shrugged. Well, something's got them stirred up. That stuck in my head for a while after he left. Later that week, I was working on the water pump near the barn when I heard something move in the woods. A branch snap, heavy. I froze for a second. It didn't sound like a deer. Too slow, too deliberate. But again, I couldn't see anything. I stood there holding my wrench, waiting for another sound. Nothing. Just stillness. Rusty was inside then, so I didn't have him to back me up. I shook it off and went back to work. Told myself it was probably a stray cow from the next property or maybe that bear Clay mentioned. You get used to noises living out here. Everything makes a sound. The wind through the trees, raccoons knocking over buckets, owls that sound like people talking if you catch them at the right hour. After a while, you stop reacting to it all. Still, I couldn't shake that uneasy feeling. Around that time, my days started stretching longer because of small repairs and chores I'd been putting off. I'd go in around sunset, wash up, make dinner, usually something simple like eggs or soup. Then I'd sit at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone until I got tired. I didn't watch much television. Never cared for all that noise. But one night, I noticed Rusty wasn't on the porch like usual. I called for him, and he came running from behind the barn, tail low, ears back. That wasn't like him. He's a tough old mutt, part hound, part who knows what, and he doesn't scare easy. I walked out there with my flashlight, checking around. The woods behind the barn were quiet, too quiet. Even the frogs down by the creek had stopped croaking. I remember shining the light along the fence and thinking I saw something move. Not big, just a shape slipping behind the trees. Could have been anything, though. I wasn't about to start imagining things. Next morning, everything looked normal again. Pigs were fine, fence was fine. I went about my day like nothing happened. I guess what I'm saying is, it didn't all just hit at once. It built up. A bark here, a noise there. Little things you brush off until they start adding up in the back of your mind. I remember telling Randy at the co-op, "Feels like something's hanging around my property lately." He laughed, said, "Welcome to Appalachia. Everything out here wants to eat your food or your livestock." He wasn't wrong. I'd lost chickens before to hawks, and raccoons had gotten into the feed more than once, so I chalked it up to normal life, just part of living out here. But that didn't explain why Rusty had started sleeping inside more often, or why the pigs would bunch together in one corner of the pen at night, making these low grunts, not their usual playful ones. I thought maybe there was some new predator moving through, coyotes maybe. They travel in packs and can spook animals badly without even attacking. I figured I'd keep an eye out. Then one night, I was sitting by the window drinking a beer, just watching the yard. The motion light over the barn flickered on, then off, then on again. Usually that means a moth got too close to the sensor, but the way it kept blinking, it felt almost deliberate. Rusty started whining again. I stood up, walked to the porch, and looked out. Couldn't see anything but the glow of the light catching the edge of the pen. I listened hard, but it was dead quiet. I waited maybe a minute before the light went out completely. That was it. No drama, just another weird night. The next morning, I noticed one of the fence posts by the pen was loose. Looked like it had been lifted up a few inches and dropped back down. Not dug out, lifted. I remember running my hand along the wood thinking, that's odd. It takes real strength to move a post like that without breaking it. Still, I told myself it could have been the heat expanding the soil or maybe a hog rubbing up against it. Logic's easier than panic. That day, I fixed the post, fed the pigs, went inside, and made a sandwich. Just another Tuesday, right? If you'd asked me back then if I thought anything strange was going on, I'd have said no. Just regular farm headaches. But looking back, there was something changing. In the animals, in me, even in the air around here. At the time, I didn't realize I was right on the edge of something I wouldn't be able to explain later. But for that week, life was still normal. Just fences, feed, and the same quiet hills I'd known my whole life. And I had no idea what was coming next. A couple of weeks went by after all that weirdness started, and honestly, I kind of forgot about it. Things had quieted down, pigs were calm, the dog wasn't acting up as much, and I figured whatever it was had moved on. Coyotes come through, bears wander off, life goes back to normal. That's just how it goes out here. But then one morning, I went out to feed and noticed one of the gates was hanging open. Not broken, not busted, just unlatched. The pigs were all still there, except one. Big gray one, about 180 pounds, gone. No blood, no drag marks, no hole under the fence. It looked like someone had just walked in, lifted it out, and walked away. I stood there scratching my head, trying to think of any possible reason that made sense. My first thought was, maybe I didn't latch it right last night. I do that sometimes, close it halfway and forget to snap it. But even then, pigs don't just open gates. They push, root, squeal, something, and there was none of that. I spent the rest of that morning walking the fence line, checking every inch. Nothing. No holes, no hair, no tracks. I could make out. It hadn't rained in days, so the ground was dry and cracked, useless for prints. I remember standing out there with my coffee, staring at that empty spot in the pen, thinking, all right, it's probably a coyote or maybe even a bear. Took it and dragged it off before daylight. But the thing was, a coyote doesn't open a latch. And a bear, you'd see some kind of struggle. It didn't add up. That night, I locked up tighter, chained the gate, double-checked every latch. Rusty stayed out with me, pacing the edge of the pen. I even left a couple of motion lights on, thinking maybe the brightness would scare off whatever was coming around. Next morning, all seemed fine. every pig accounted for. I felt stupid for worrying so much. I went about my day fixing a busted pipe in the barn and running into town for feed. Then, 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, I didn't notice until the following morning. One of the smaller pigs, gone. The weird part was, the gate was still latched. I checked it twice. The chain was still on, but the bottom section of the fence looked like it had been lifted, not cut, just bent upward a few inches, enough for something strong to get under it. I remember kneeling down, running my hand along the wire. It was cold and twisted, like someone had pried it up and shoved it back down. I told myself, okay, this has got to be coyotes. They can dig and squeeze under things sometimes. But even then, there was no hole, no digging. Just that one bent section. That night, I stayed up a little later, sat by the window with the lights off, listening. Rusty was restless again, growling low every now and then. Around midnight, I heard something move outside, faint, slow, like footsteps in the dirt. I turned the porch light on and went out with my flashlight. The second I opened the door, Rusty bolted toward the barn, barking like crazy. I followed him, light bouncing all over, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. But by the time I got there, it was quiet again. Just him stiffing around, hair standing up on his back. I swept the flashlight across the fence, nothing. The pigs were awake, huddled together, eyes wide, breathing fast. I swear you could smell the fear coming off them. It's this sharp, sour smell like sweat and mud mixed. I stayed out there a while, waiting, listening. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I told Rusty to come inside. He didn't want to at first. He just stood there staring at the woods like he knew something I didn't. Next day, I started asking around. I saw my neighbor, Randy, at the co-op and told him about it. He laughed at first, said, "You sure it ain't some of them high school kids messing with you?" "Pretty sure," I said. "Kids don't usually lift fences and carry off pigs in the middle of the night." He shrugged and said, "Could be a bear. We had one tearing through trash cans a couple weeks back." "Yeah, but no tracks, no mess," I told him. "It's just clean. Too clean." He gave me a look like I was overthinking it. "Well, you got cameras, don't you?" I didn't yet. But that's when the idea stuck. That night, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling online, looking at cheap security cameras. Nothing fancy, just ones that could record and maybe alert me if there was movement. I ordered 2, one for the barn and one for the pen. While I waited for them to come in, I did what I could. Started checking around every night before bed, making sure the lights were working, the locks were tight. I even set up an old trail cam I used for deer hunting, just to see if it would catch anything. After a few days, the cameras arrived. I spent that morning setting them up. Ran one cable through the barn, aimed toward the gate, and mounted the other near the pen facing out toward the woods. I remember testing them, waving my hand in front, watching the red light blink. Felt kind of silly, but also relieved, I guess, like finally I'd be able to see whatever was happening. That first night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Just knowing the cameras were rolling gave me some peace. But the next morning when I checked the footage, all I saw were bugs and shadows. No movement. Nothing unusual, same thing the next night and the next. Just wind blowing the grass, moths fluttering past the lens. Still, I kept checking every morning. Routine. Then, one Saturday, I walked out to find the barn door cracked open again. Not wide, just enough that it moved with the breeze. I was sure I'd closed it. Inside, one of the feed bags was torn open. Not shredded, but like someone had ripped it clean from the top. Again, no prints, no mess, just spilled feed. I remember calling my brother Clay about it later that day. "Man, you sure you don't got some crackhead sneaking around out there?" he said. I laughed a little, but it wasn't funny. If it was a person, they'd have to be damn strong. The fence was bent again. "You should call the sheriff," he said. "And tell them what? That someone stole a pig through a fence but left no tracks? They'll think I've lost it." He paused a second. "Yeah, maybe, but get those cameras up high. Maybe you'll catch whoever it is." That night I adjusted the one by the pen, aimed it lower so I could see the fence better. I set the motion alerts higher too. Around midnight I woke up to Rusty barking again. Not crazy barking, just short, deep bursts like he'd seen something. I lay there in bed, listening. It stopped after a minute. I thought about getting up, but I didn't. Told myself, the camera's got it, I'll check in the morning. And when morning came, nothing looked disturbed. Fence was fine, pigs were fine, For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe whatever it was had moved on. But still, there was this little voice in the back of my head. Check the footage. So I did. And even though I didn't see anything that morning, what I found on those cameras later, that's what changed everything. But at that point, I still didn't know what I was up against. To me, it was just a mystery, some animal maybe. Something I could explain eventually, once I got the right footage. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. Just something normal. I just hadn't caught it yet. For the first week or two after setting up those cameras, everything seemed fine. Every morning, I'd pour myself a cup of coffee, sit down at the table, and scroll through the footage. Just raccoons, wind, bugs flying past the lens. Nothing out of the ordinary. I started thinking maybe the pigs disappearing was over. Whatever had been bothering them was gone. And honestly, I felt a little silly, like maybe I'd overreacted. But then things started getting weird again. It wasn't one big thing. It was little stuff. The kind of small things you notice but don't say out loud because you sound paranoid. The pigs were restless again. Not all the time, just certain nights. I'd hear them grunting or shifting around more than usual. Rusty would pace the porch, ears up, staring toward the barn. Sometimes I'd go outside with a flashlight, sweep it across the pen, and there'd be nothing. Just the beam catching dust and leaves. One night, the motion light over the pen flicked on around midnight. I looked out the window, but there was nothing there. The light stayed on for maybe 30 seconds, then clicked off. 5 minutes later, it came back on again. That happened 3 times before it stopped. I thought, all right, maybe the wind's moving branches. Maybe moths are triggering the sensor. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Still, the next morning I checked the footage. The motion alert timestamps matched, but when I watched it, the camera only caught a brief shadow moving across the far corner, too fast and too low to make out. Looked like it might have been an animal, maybe a dog, but then again, the size didn't seem right. I saved the clip anyway, figured I'd show Clay next time he came over. That week, it rained for 3 straight days, hard, heavy rain that turned the whole yard into mud. I didn't expect to catch anything on camera with the storm going, but I left them running anyway. When it finally cleared up, I went out to check the pens. I remember stepping into the mud and seeing something weird right by the back fence, a deep imprint like something heavy had stepped there. It wasn't a shoe, and it wasn't a hoof print. It was wide, almost human-shaped, but larger. Too big, even for a boot. I crouched down to look at it closer. It had toes, 5 of them, clear as day. No claws, just thick, rounded toes like a person's foot, only longer. The whole thing was maybe 15 inches long. I just stared at it for a minute, rain dripping off my jacket, thinking, what the hell am I looking at? Then I laughed to myself, probably just washed out mud. Don't be stupid, I said out loud, like I needed to hear it. The rain can make any shape look weird. I filled it in with my boot, shook my head, and kept walking. That night, though, I couldn't get it out of my mind. A few nights later, around 2 a.m., Rusty started barking again, sharp, angry barks that didn't stop. I got up, threw on my boots, grabbed my flashlight, and went outside. He was standing at the edge of the porch, growling toward the woods. The pigs were making noise too, snorting and shuffling like something had spooked them. I shined the light over the pen and caught a glimpse of the fence shaking, not from the wind, but like something had bumped it, hard. I called out, "Hey, get on out of there," thinking maybe it was a coyote or even some drunk kid cutting through the property. The second I yelled, the noise stopped. Silence. The kind of silence that feels too still. No frogs, no bugs, no nothing. Even Rusty went quiet, just standing there with his fur bristled. After about 30 seconds of that, I started backing toward the door, keeping the light pointed out toward the trees. Then I heard it. One heavy crack of a branch breaking far back in the dark. Whatever it was moving away now, not fast, just steady. I stayed there a few minutes longer, waiting to see if it came back, but it didn't. I finally went inside, locked the door, and tried to sleep, but my heart was still racing. Next morning, I went back out to look. There was a fresh scrape on the bottom part of the fence, like something had tried to lift it again. The mud was pressed down, same as before, big, wide impressions. Still no clear tracks. I told myself it was probably a bear. They get strong smells and come sniffing around sometimes. That had to be it. Still, when I checked the camera that faced the pen, I expected to see something this time. I sat down at my table, scrolled to the timestamp from the night before, and hit play. The video started with the pig sleeping, just lumps of movement in the dark. Then, around 2:17 a.m., Rusty came into frame barking at the fence. Right after that, you could see the corner of the pen shaking slightly. Not wildly, just enough to notice, but there was something in the shadows behind it. A darker shape moving slow, hunched. I squinted, replayed it a few times, pausing every second. Whatever it was tall. Taller than a man, at least 7 feet, maybe more. And the way it moved, slow but heavy. It didn't look like an animal walking on all fours. It was upright. I froze the frame and stared at it for a while. My first thought was that maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe the rain or the glare from the sensor light made it look taller than it was. That had to be it. Still, I couldn't shake it. Later that afternoon, Clay stopped by. I showed him the clip. He leaned over the laptop, squinting at the screen. "What's that supposed to be?" "I don't know," I said. "That right there, in the corner," he laughed. "Man, that's just a shadow." "You're looking too hard. Probably a raccoon or a bear." I wanted to believe him. "Yeah, I guess so. Tell you what," he said. "Set up another one closer to the woods. Get a different angle. If there's something out here, you'll catch it." He left that evening, still chuckling, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw. So, the next day, I took his advice. I bought another cheap camera from the hardware store and set it up on an old fence post, facing out toward the tree line. I made sure the angle caught the pen and part of the woods behind it. That night, I stayed up later than usual, half watching TV but mostly listening. Every little creak made me glance at the window. I didn't hear anything major, just 1 or 2 faint thumps way off in the distance. When I checked the footage the next morning, I expected to see the same nothing I always saw. But about 2 hours into the recording, I caught movement again. Something dark moved between the trees, just outside the range of the light. Could have been a deer, sure, but it was upright again. You could see its outline pass through the gaps in the branches. I paused the video, leaned back, and just stared. By now, it wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't exciting either. It was just unsettling. I showed it to nobody this time. I just saved it and left it alone. Over the next week, nothing else happened. No missing pigs, no weird noises. I started to relax again. I even told myself that whatever had been coming around was probably gone now that the cameras were up. Animals get smart. Once they smell human scent or hear noises they don't like, they move on. But then, one night toward the end of that month, the motion alert woke me up again. The phone buzzed, that same alert tone it gives when the camera picks up movement. I grabbed it off the nightstand and looked. The thumbnail showed the pen, dark as usual, but I could see something at the bottom of the screen. A shape. I rubbed my eyes, sat up, and replayed it. The motion had only lasted about 15 seconds, so I backed it up and slowed it down. And there it was. Something walking along the side of the pen. Tall, broad, hunched forward. It moved with purpose, not stumbling like an animal, not sneaking like a person. Just slow and sure. It stopped at the fence, reached down. I swear I saw its hand move, and then the clip ended. My chest went tight. My first thought was, it's gotta be a person. Someone's messing with me. That's what makes sense. But who the hell is that tall? I sat there in the dark, staring at my phone, heart pounding. It felt like hours before I finally got up and turned every outside light on. Rusty stayed close that night, wouldn't leave the porch. Next morning I went out to check. The fence was bent again, same corner, same spot. Only this time, the ground was damp, and I could see where something had pressed deep into the soil. Not claws, not hooves, just wide, flat prints. I crouched down, took a picture with my phone, then stood there for a while, not really sure what to do. I told myself, it's probably a trick of the camera. Maybe a guy cutting through the woods, maybe lighting distortion. But the more I tried to convince myself, the less sense it made. That evening, I went back through every clip from the past month just to see if I'd missed anything. And somewhere in there, near the start, I noticed something I hadn't before. In one of the early clips, just a blur in the corner near the pen, there was movement, the same tall shadow. I'd brushed it off at the time. That meant it had been coming around a lot longer than I thought. I sat there for a long time that night, just staring at the screen. By the end of that week, I'd set up more lights, more cameras, and locked every gate twice over. But deep down, I already knew. Whatever was coming around wasn't scared of light or fences. It was watching, waiting, and I had no idea what the hell it wanted. That Sunday afternoon, I remember it clear as day. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, half watching the news, half scrolling through my phone. The night before had been quiet, which was rare lately, and I figured I'd go through the footage just to make sure nothing had happened. By that point, it had become part of my morning routine. Check the cameras, feed the pigs, get on with the day. But when I opened the folder on my laptop and saw that little red motion alert timestamp, 2:43 a.m., I knew right away something was different. Usually, when it's just bugs or rain, the motion lasts a few seconds. This one was over 3 minutes. That got my attention. I clicked play, leaned back in the chair, and waited. At first, it was just static movement. A few pigs shifting around, Rusty walking by the fence. The outside light flickered once, then steadied. And then something moved near the edge of the frame. It came in slow, almost careful. At first, I thought it was a man. Looked upright, broad shoulders, moving steady toward the pen. The shape was massive, though. The kind of big that doesn't make sense for a person. My brain tried to fill in the blanks. Maybe the angle's wrong, maybe it's closer to the camera than I think, but then it crouched. And that's when my stomach dropped. You could see its arms stretch forward, reaching for the latch on the gate. The hand, if you can call it that, was long, thick fingers, dark against the metal. It fumbled a second, tugged, then stopped. It looked around, like it was checking for something. I paused the video, sat back, and just stared. I must have replayed that moment 20 times, trying to convince myself it was a prank, someone in the suit maybe. But I couldn't make it fit. The proportions were wrong. The arms hung too low, the shoulders too broad, and there was no sound, no sign of headlights or footsteps, nothing but that slow, deliberate movement. I hit play again. It moved along the fence line, bent down, and you could actually see it hook its fingers under the bottom panel. The metal flexed up like it was made of foil. One corner popped loose, and the pig started squealing. It didn't flinch, just reached under, grabbed one of the smaller ones, and lifted it up in one motion. I swear, the thing picked up that pig like it was a pillow. Then it turned, walked off toward the tree line, and disappeared into the dark. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The whole thing was over in less than a minute. I backed up the clip again, slower this time, frame by frame. Every detail just made it worse. You could see the outline of its head, big, sloped, with hair matted down around the neck. Its eyes caught a bit of reflection from the motion light, but not like animal eyes. They didn't glow. They just looked dull, like a person's. Jesus Christ, I muttered, pushing back from the table. I actually stood up, like I needed distance from the laptop. My first thought was, someone's screwing with me. Maybe a neighbor, maybe some idiot trying to go viral, but the longer I stared at that screen, the less that idea made sense. Nobody's that big, nobody's that quiet. I went out to the pen right after. Broad daylight, but I still felt jumpy walking across the yard. Rusty followed close, tail down. When I reached the fence, it was bent, same spot, just like in the video. The latch was untouched, but that bottom section was lifted up again, clean and perfect. No claw marks, no tear, just bent. I crouched down, ran my fingers along it. The metal was cold and warped, like it had been pulled up with force and pushed back into place. The dirt under it was packed hard. Deep, wide prints, not boot prints, not hooves, flat with a shape to them. Like a human foot, but bigger, wider. That's when it hit me. I was looking at proof of something I didn't even believe in. I walked back to the house, grabbed my phone, and called Clay. He picked up on the second ring. "What's up, man? You home?" I said. "Yeah, why? Come by here. I need you to see something." He must have heard something in my voice, because he didn't joke around. Said he'd be over in 20. While I waited, I kept pacing between the laptop and the window, replaying the video, glancing outside. The footage felt unreal, but the bent fence, that was right there, right in front of me. Clay showed up half an hour later, stepped inside and looked at me funny. "You look like hell," he said. Just watch this. I turned the laptop around and hit play. He leaned in, squinting, chewing on his lip as it played. When it got to the part where the thing lifted the pig, he just muttered, "What the hell?" "I know," I said quietly. We watched it twice more. He didn't say much the second time, just kept shaking his head. Finally, he said, "Could be a guy in a suit. You see the fence? You think someone pulled that off without making a sound? And what about the size?" He didn't answer. We went out to the pen together. Clay crouched down, ran his hand along the bent section. "Man, this thing's thick steel. You need a crowbar to bend that." "Yeah." "And it didn't use one." He stood up, looked toward the woods. You think it's real?" I didn't answer right away. "I don't know what it is, but it ain't a bear. And it sure as hell ain't a person." We stood there for a while, just staring at the tree line. You could hear the woods creaking in the wind, birds chirping like normal. Everything looked calm, but I swear, it felt like something was watching us back. Clay finally broke the silence. "You need to call somebody." "Like who?" "Sheriff. They'll laugh me out of the county." He nodded, but he didn't disagree. "You gotta keep that video though. Don't delete it." "Oh, I won't." He stayed another hour, mostly just talking through what it could have been. Every theory we came up with fell apart. No footprints from boots, no signs of tools, no tire tracks, no hair caught in the fence. When he finally left, I locked every door and window in the house. Not because I thought it'd come for me, but because I just didn't know anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made my stomach knot. I kept replaying the video in my head. That huge arm reaching down, that pig squealing for a second before it went quiet. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I got up and looked out the window. The motion lights were off. The woods were pitch black. Rusty was curled up by the door, ears twitching but quiet. I thought about waking him and going out there with a flashlight. Part of me needed to see for myself, to prove it wasn't still around. But another part of me, the smarter part, said, stay inside. By morning, I had convinced myself I'd send the footage to someone, wildlife officials maybe, or a local news station. But when I sat back down at the computer, my hands were shaking too bad to even type. I watched the video again, one more time, in silence. At one point, right before it lifted the fence, the camera caught something else, a faint sound, almost like a low grunt or exhale. It wasn't human. It was deep, rough, almost tired sounding. I paused it there, just staring at the frozen frame of that massive figure bent over my pen. It hit me how close it was to the camera, maybe 30 feet, tops. If I'd stepped outside right then, I would have been staring right at it. The thought made me sick to my stomach. I saved the footage to a flash drive, unplugged the laptop, and just sat there a while. I didn't know what to do next. Call someone? Post it? Tell nobody? Every option felt wrong. Later that day, I drove into town just to clear my head. Got gas, picked up feed, tried to make small talk with the guy at the counter. But the whole time, I kept seeing that shadow in my head, that impossible shape crouched over the fence. When I got home that evening, the air felt heavy. The woods were quiet again, too quiet. Even the pigs were uneasy, pacing more than usual. I added more lights around the yard, pointed one directly at the tree line. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and sat down with a beer I didn't even really want. For the first time since I moved out here, the place didn't feel like home. It felt watched. That night, I didn't check the cameras. I couldn't. I just wanted to sleep without knowing what might be out there. And even though nothing happened, no noise, no lights, no missing pigs, I still woke up 3 or 4 times, listening, waiting. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw, and I knew I couldn't unsee it. The morning after watching that footage, I felt off, like I hadn't really slept, even though I must have drifted off sometime near sunrise. My head hurt, my stomach felt tight, and every sound outside made me look toward the window. I kept replaying the video in my head, that moment where the thing lifted the fence. No matter how many times I thought about it, it didn't fit anything I knew. It was too quiet, too sure of itself. Whatever it was, it had done it before. I poured a cup of coffee, sat down at the table again, and watched the video one more time. I told myself it was for proof, to make sure I wasn't remembering it wrong. But deep down, I was hoping I'd catch something that made it make sense. Nothing did. So I did what any sane person would do. I called Clay again. He picked up, sounded half asleep. "Yeah? I watched that video again," I said. "You need to see it in the daylight. I swear it's not just some trick." He sighed. "You still on that, man? Just come by," I said. "Please." He showed up around 10. I could tell by the way he got out of the truck, slow, cautious, that he wasn't as skeptical as he'd been before. I opened the laptop, scrolled straight to the clip, and hit play. He stood there behind me, arms crossed, watching quietly. When it ended, he didn't say anything for a good 10 seconds. Then he said, That don't look fake." "I know," I said, trying not to sound too relieved. "I told you. But it still don't mean it's what you think. Could be someone in a suit." I laughed a little, but not because it was funny. "You know anyone that size? That quiet? Out here?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I don't." We went out to the pen again. The bent fence was still there, and I pointed out the prints in the dirt. He crouched, touched one with his hand, and let out a low whistle. That's big." "Yeah," I said quietly. For a while, we just stood there. The woods looked normal, but it felt heavy, like the air had weight to it. Clay finally said, "You should show that video to somebody." "Like wildlife or the sheriff?" "I thought about it," I said, "but what am I supposed to say? Hey, I caught Bigfoot stealing my pigs? They'll think I'm nuts." He shrugged. "Then tell them it's a trespasser. Let them see it for themselves." So that's what I did. That afternoon, I called the county sheriff's office. The woman who answered sounded bored until I mentioned the part about livestock being stolen. Then she said she'd send someone out to take a look. A deputy showed up about 2 hours later. Young guy, maybe mid-20s. He introduced himself as Deputy Coleman and asked me to show him where it happened. Out by the pen, he took a few pictures, scribbled notes, then asked if I had footage. "Yeah," I said. "It's on my laptop inside." We went in, and I played the video. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, squinting at the screen. The more it played, the straighter he sat. When it ended, he just said, "Huh. That's all you've got?" I said. He chuckled a little. "Well, I'm not saying I know what I'm looking at." "You sure it's not some guy playing a prank?" I gave him a look. "If it is, it's one hell of a prank." Thing bent steel like it was nothing. He nodded, clearly not wanting to say much more. He took my statement, said he'd file a report, and told me to keep the footage backed up. "If anything else happens, call us right away," he said. Then he gave me a little half smile and added, "You might want to stay inside after dark for a bit." When he drove off, I could tell he didn't know what to make of it either. That night, I barely ate dinner. I just sat in the living room with the lights on, flipping between the local news and my phone. I even searched online. Large animals stealing pigs, upright creature Appalachia, Bigfoot caught on camera. It was a mistake. The internet's full of people who'll either laugh at you or swear they've seen the same thing. None of it helped. Still, one video stood out, some old clip from the next state over. Grainy, dark, but the movement looked almost identical. Same long arms, same hunched walk. I watched it 3 times, then closed the tab and just sat there staring at the wall. The following morning, I checked the pen again. No new damage, no missing pigs. The fence was still bent, but nothing had come back. I talked to my brother that evening, told him the whole story. He's the kind of guy who doesn't believe in anything he can't measure or fix. I figured he'd tell me I'd lost it, but he just said, "You sure it wasn't a person?" "I thought so at first," I said, "but after watching that video, I don't think so." He was quiet for a second, then said, "You ever think maybe you shouldn't mess with it? Whatever it is, maybe it's better off left alone." That stuck with me. Over the next few nights, I barely slept. I'd sit up half the night listening. Every snap outside made my pulse jump. Rusty stayed on edge too, barking at nothing, pacing by the door. After about a week with no new activity, I tried to get back to normal. I fixed the fence again, installed a couple more lights, and added another camera facing the woods. Part of me hoped it would catch something new, and part of me hoped it never would. Every time I looked at those pigs, though, I couldn't shake the thought that something had stood right there, so close I could have seen it if I'd just walked outside that night. That thought still gets me. By the end of that week, things quieted down. No noises, no motion alerts. The pigs settled again. It was like nothing had ever happened. But even now, every time the motion light flickers, I still look. I can't help it. I guess some things just stay in your head, even when they're done. After that week, things went quiet. No noises, no missing pigs, no bent fences, just stillness. It should have been a relief, but honestly, it didn't feel that way. It was the kind of quiet that makes you pay attention to it, like waiting for a storm that never comes. I started leaving the porch light on all night. I even moved the pig pen closer to the house, maybe 30 yards or so where I could see it from the kitchen window. It was more work than I wanted to do, but I felt better knowing I could look out and see them anytime. A few people from town heard about it. Clay must have talked, because next time I stopped by the feed store, two guys gave me that look. You know, half curious, half ready to laugh. One of them, Rick, said, "Heard you caught Bigfoot on tape, huh?" I just smiled and said, "Yeah, something like that," and left it at that. No point arguing with folks who've already decided you're crazy. Truth is, I didn't even want to show that footage anymore. The deputy had a copy. Clay had seen it, and that was enough. Every time I tried to watch it again, I got that same feeling in my gut. The one that told me I wasn't supposed to have seen it in the first place. A few nights later, I was sitting on the porch with Rusty. It was just about dark, crickets starting up, air cooling off after one of those long, humid days. I was nursing a beer, trying to unwind, when Rusty's ears perked up. He didn't bark, just sat up and stared out toward the woods. I froze. For a second, I thought I heard something too, a branch snap, way off in the trees. But then it was gone, just the bugs again. I whispered, "You hear that, boy?" He didn't move, didn't even blink, just stared. I sat there another minute or two, watching the edge of the tree line. Nothing moved. No lights, no shapes, nothing. Finally, Rusty let out this low whine, like he was tired of waiting, and lay back down. I stayed out there until the beer got warm, but whatever was out there, if anything, stayed hidden. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how much life had changed in just a month. Before all this, my biggest worry was fixing the tractor or keeping the feed dry when it rained. Now, I double-checked locks and left lights on like a paranoid city guy. The strangest part was how normal everything else looked. The woods didn't look different. The pen was fine. The pigs were calm again. But something in me had shifted. The next morning, I took down most of the cameras. I kept one, the one facing the house, but the rest I packed up in a box and put away. I didn't want to keep watching anymore. Watching hadn't stopped anything. If anything, it had just shown me something I didn't know how to unsee. That weekend, Clay came by again. We sat out back drinking coffee, and he asked, "So, it's been quiet, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "Too quiet," he chuckled. "You gonna keep those cameras up?" "I kept one," I said. "That's enough." He nodded slowly. "You ever figure out what that thing was?" I shook my head. "Nope. And honestly, I don't want to." He didn't say anything after that. We just sat there listening to the wind move through the trees. A few days later, I found one more footprint by the old fence line. It wasn't fresh, maybe a few days old, but the shape was there. Big, wide, same as before. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just filled it in with dirt, leveled it out, and went about my day. After that, nothing. No noises, no movement, no missing animals. Weeks turned into a month. The nights felt normal again. I started sleeping better. Rusty stopped pacing the porch. Even the air around here felt lighter. But I'll tell you the truth, I still think about that night. Not every day, but enough. Usually when I'm sitting on the porch alone or walking past the barn after dark. I'll catch myself glancing toward the woods just to make sure nothing's moving out there. It's funny though, before all this, I didn't believe in any of that stuff. Bigfoot, monsters, whatever, sounded like nonsense. I used to laugh at those shows on TV. But now, I don't laugh anymore. I don't know what I saw, and I'm not going to claim I do. All I know is that something came out of those woods, and it wasn't a bear. It wasn't a person either. It was something else, something that knew what it was doing. Sometimes I wonder why it stopped. Maybe it realized the cameras were there. Maybe it just moved on. Or maybe, and this one bothers me the most, maybe it's still out there just watching from farther back. But after all this time, I've made peace with it. I got my farm back in order, the pigs are fine, and life's mostly back to normal. Still, when folks ask me about it, and they do, sometimes, I just tell them the truth. I say, I don't care what you believe. I know what I saw. and that's enough for me.